I love this guy. Chasten Buttigieg and Equality California Board Secretary Cecilia Cabello, who also served as Mayor Pete's California State Director. Hey, guys.
Hi, Chasten. It's so good to see you.
Good to see you.
So how have you and Pete been spending quarantine? And more importantly, how are Buddy and Truman?
That's the most important question. Buddy and Truman are probably confused as to why we are home so much, but I'm very grateful for this time together. I keep saying, you know, silver linings everywhere for us. We said we wanted more time together. Now here's one more way to get time together. But I'm enjoying spending more time with dogs, spending more time with him. And, you know, we've got a roof over our head. We've got food in the pantry. We have a lot to be grateful for right now. And another thing I'm very grateful for is that we have a house with levels, so I can get away from him if I need to, and we can go to our separate spaces. I've taken over the attic, which used to be really gross, so now I'm trying to make this into my own space. But, you know, a lot to be grateful for, and spending time just, you know, catching my breath. We went from 100 miles an hour to 0. So
I remember.
Yes, you do. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. It's good to hear. So from your experience as a teacher, what are some of the specific issues that LGBTQ plus students and young people are facing right now during quarantine?
Well, I think one of the most important things right now is I remember, you know, for some of my students, school was that space for them. School was the thing that they looked forward to coming to. There were teachers there who were, you know, affirming, and that became their safe space. And so now I'm a little worried about how schools are adapting to make sure that kids still have that safe, open, welcoming, accepting, and affirming environment. How can we do that digitally and virtually? And I think right now students are also, you know, facing you know, a community that is going through a lot of change. And sometimes that means schools aren't willing to catch up to the change that we're making as a society. So, and especially with, you know, public schools rolling back a lot of those Obama era protections, you know, kids have to deal with a lot: hostile teachers, work environments, unsafe environments, not only at school, but in the home. And also 40% of homeless youth in our country identify as LGBTQIA. And so there are a lot of issues facing young queer people in our country, not only at school, but in the home and in the community. And it's important that in all those spaces, we make sure that they are safe and affirming. But unfortunately, we know we have a lot of work to do there.
Yeah, it's true. And on that note, Equality California has sent letters to superintendents up and down the state with recommendations on how districts can be more supportive of LGBTQ plus students. Things like holding virtual GSA meetings, virtual counseling sessions, virtual mentorship. And we've seen tons of heartwarming stories about teachers going above and beyond to support their students. What do you think school districts, advocates, and the community in general can be doing right now to really help support LGBTQ plus students and youth?
I love that some schools are adapting already to that. Like I was saying, you know, a GSA or any sort of like diversity club or just an affirming extracurricular could have been that space for a young queer person. So I love that some schools are creating the virtual mentorship opportunities, you know, doing virtual GSAs and counseling sessions are extremely important because we can't forget our most vulnerable students. And some of those vulnerable students are those kids in the LGBTQIA community. I've been thinking a lot about other students who are falling through the cracks, right? And students who might be having a really hard time adjusting to, you know, physical distancing and virtual learning when they might have relied on being in a classroom with a teacher who took extra care of them, right? They knew if they came to school, they had a teacher who cared about them and it was safe to be there. There are also students you have to remember who are going back into hostile homes, back into homes where maybe they're not out, or it might be a potentially dangerous environment. So I also think schools and teachers should be putting out more information for parents on how kids can access those virtual counseling or mentorship opportunities. And then, you know, I never want to, as a teacher, you never want to, you know, step on the toes of parents, and parents know their kids best, but sometimes they don't, right? Sometimes teachers know things about kids that maybe they're not ready to share at home. Maybe school's that safe environment. So I think teachers and districts should also be putting out opportunities for those kids to know if you are in an unsafe environment, if you're nervous at home, if you are in an environment where you feel like you can't talk about your most basic truths, here are those outlets for you. Here are the spaces we're creating for you.
Yeah.
Teachers have a unique insight into what's going on in their kids' life, and they're doing so much right now. I think teachers are doing 10 times the work right now, but I'm worried about we're forgetting about some of the most vulnerable kids, and especially those being young queer people.
Yeah, and in LA County alone, we've seen a decrease in child abuse reports because teachers were those eyes. So if you're a community member, just checking in on kids you might know that might need some help is something I think also really important. It's really scary. So based on your own personal experience as a young person coming out, as a teacher, and interacting with LGBTQ plus students on the campaign trail, which we did all over the state from Modesto to Palm Springs, what does the phrase safe and supportive schools mean to you?
So I think this is, one of those terms or sentences that gets tossed around, and I feel like maybe some school districts think about it like they check the box, right? Like, we're safe, we're affirming, like, of course, we're all nice people. But part of being a truly safe and inclusive environment is asking your student body if they feel safe and included. You can't just say, like, this is a warm environment, we're very welcoming and accepting, if you haven't asked your students. And even though you might have a GSA at your school, there are probably still students who are reluctant to go to that group because they're not even sure if they'll be welcomed there or accepted there. And if they truly, they're wondering if they truly belong in the school environment. So if, administrators are really wanting to create a safe and inclusive environment, that means bringing students' voices to the tables. And, when I was on the campaign trail for Peter, I visited over 100 LGBTQ centers and homeless service providers where there were young queer people who were identifying issues with their schools, their teachers, and their homes, right? And in many of those places, they felt like their voices weren't being heard, they weren't being validated as a human being, and they just weren't safe. And you have to bring those voices to the table. That's why we were out there doing that work on the campaign, making sure that we were bringing in as many diverse voices as possible, especially for trans teenagers and especially for trans teens of color in this country who are constantly being pushed away from their home and their community and unsure where they fit and where they belong. So if a school really wants to be safe and inclusive, you got to make sure you're including those voices. And maybe some kids aren't ready to voice those concerns or opinions, but you have to find ways to hear them. You can't just put up a rainbow sticker on your office door and say, this is a safe space. How are you truly making it safe?
Right, exactly. And in the long run, what do we need to do as a community in general to make sure that LGBTQ plus youth are safe and supported both at home and in schools?
Sure. So I think it's two things when it comes to schools, especially public schools, any school in this country that's receiving federal funding. I think we got a lot of work to do to reinstate. Let me roll back. Let me take a step back. We have to elect Joe Biden this fall because we need a Democrat in the White House. We need a Democrat who is appointing a Secretary of Education who actually believes in public education, who actually believes in protecting children, and who believes in queer youth. And that means reinstating some of those Obama-era policies that were stripped away by this extremely homophobic and transphobic administration.
Mm-hmm.
And it also requires, legislators who aren't afraid to pass the Equality Act. There are so many states, I'm living in one right now, where queer people lack basic protections. We can go to school as teachers and simply be fired for how we identify or who we love. And if we truly care about protecting young people in this country, then we've got to at least start with both of those things, making sure that it starts at the top, restoring moral leadership to the White House in this country, because a lot of the tone gets set at the top, right? So when the president or the vice president, spew homophobic or transphobic rhetoric, that trickles down in to the words of children, right? Where other kids and teachers and administrators feel emboldened to be hateful and bigoted. So let's restore some moral leadership to the White House. And then let's not be afraid to take on big fights like passing the Equality Act.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's been wonderful talking to you. It's so good to see you again. I've missed you guys. And please send Pete my best, and Truman and Buddy.
I will, absolutely. I think you may have heard Buddy barking. It's almost dinner time for him.
I did.
your best.
Yeah, thank you. Good to see you.